We are live and being recorded.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Kate Miller, and I'm the Executive Director of the Napa Valley Transportation Authority. And this is a community meeting to discuss potential improvements to the State Route 29 Up Valley Corridor at the intersections of Rutherford Road, Oakville Cross Road, and Madison Street. Next slide.
Oh. Kate, we have a few minutes. Do you want to hold off?
Sure, I mean, we can.
Yeah, we have 18 attendees.
Okay,
And
sure.
we've got a couple more minutes.
Okay.
5:28.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone.
Hi, Ricky.
Hey, Kate.
Hi, Ricky. Nice to meet you in person. This is Pam.
Hey, Pam. Sorry, I'm not familiar with Zoom. I need to scroll around and to see where you are. Oh, I see you. Okay, nice to meet you in person.
Hi, everyone. We're just making sure that people log on. We're just waiting a few more minutes.
How to change my name on Zoom? I want to add Caltrans to end of my name, but I don't know where to change that.
If you go to participants,
Okay.
you should be able to see.
Ricky, I just did it for you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Yusuf.
Okay, Kate, we're at around 30 attendees and I've got 5:31 on my phone.
Great, we'll go ahead and start. So good afternoon. My name is Kate Miller, and I'm the Executive Director of the Napa Valley Transportation Authority. This is a community meeting to discuss potential improvements to the State Route 29 Up Valley Corridor at the intersection of Rutherford Road, Oakville Cross Road, and Madison Street. Next slide. So I just wanted to emphasize that money does not usually fall out of the sky for infrastructure projects, especially for projects in rural areas. But NVTA was fortunate to receive roughly $8 million in transportation funding from the Metropolitan Transportation Commission to make critical safety and operational improvements at these intersections. Tonight's meeting will provide an overview of project objectives, potential improvements, and the project timeline. This will be followed by an opportunity for you to provide feedback and comments. The project team includes Napa Valley Transportation Authority. We are the county transportation agency, the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, which is the regional planning agency, and GHD project consultants and engineers. We also have representatives from Caltrans participating as they own the highway. Next slide. So this is an informational community meeting that the project team has put together to gain input from the public, property owners, and stakeholders on potential improvements for the corridor. This corridor has been identified as needing operational and safety improvements and has been identified as a priority project in Napa's countywide transportation plan. A formal comment period will be scheduled in the spring of 2022 when the environmental document is released. I will now turn it over to Alberto Esqueda for a couple of housekeeping items.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Alberto Esqueda, and I'm a planner with the Napa Valley Transportation Authority. I wanted to mention a few protocols for the meeting so that we can have the meeting run a bit more smooth. So if you have any questions, please enter the questions in the Q&A window. Questions will be answered at the end of the presentation. If you would like to speak and are using a computer, use the raise hand button. Or if you have dialed in, press 9 to be put in the queue to make your comment live. If you are using a computer, also press the mute button to unmute or unmute yourself. And if you are speaking, please state your name and your agency or organization. Also, I do want to note that profanity and culturally insensitive language will not be tolerated. And I'd like to point out that we will be having audience polls throughout the meeting, so keep an eye out for those. I will now translate this information in Spanish. Buenas tardes, aquí tenemos el protocolo de la reunión. Si tiene preguntas, ingrese sus preguntas en la ventanilla de preguntas y respuestas marcada QIA. Las preguntas serán respondidas al final de la presentación. Para hablar, use el botón que dice Raise Hand, o si marcó directamente por teléfono, presione *9 para que lo pongan en la cola para hacer su comentario en vivo. Para activar su micrófono o silenciarlo, presione el botón Mute. Igual, si marcó directamente usando el teléfono, presione *6 para reactivar o silenciar su micrófono. Al hablar, por favor, indique su nombre y la agencia u organización que representa. También queremos decir que no se tolerarán blasfemias ni lenguajes culturalmente insensibles y lo podemos votar de la junta. I'll turn it back over to Kate.
Great, thank you, Alberto. I will turn it over now to a video from Supervisor Alfredo Pedrosa.
Hello, everyone. My name is Alfredo Pedrosa, Napa County Supervisor. I also have the honor of serving as chair of the Metropolitan Transportation Commission and Napa Valley Transportation Authority. Serving as chair of those organizations has given me a unique perspective on infrastructure, traffic, and congestion. But more importantly, it's just my perspective as a local, someone that lives here, someone that uses our roads and uses our infrastructure. We get to see firsthand the challenges that we face. We all cherish the rural character of our community. That also presents some unique challenges when we're trying to make some operational and safety improvements on our infrastructure. Particularly today, we want to hear from you around the intersection of Oakville Crossroad, Rutherford Road, and Madison intersection. We've been working very collaboratively with MTC, which is a regional planning organization, MBTA in the county, to look at some concepts that can improve the operations of those intersections, but more importantly, the safety of those intersections. And again, we want to hear from you. We want to gather your feedback. We want to make sure that the public understands that we're trying to achieve outcomes for the benefit of our entire community. And we're working collaboratively, so we appreciate your participation. Today, you're going to see some options of potential concepts and outcomes for those intersections. And again, we really appreciate your opportunity to have your feedback heard, and also acknowledge that we're in a very fortunate position where we've secured outside funding, $8 million from MTC, MBTA, MTC and the county are also applying for some federal funding to try to deliver these projects as quickly as possible. But today is the first step. And again, we thank you for participating and we look forward to your feedback. Hola, mi nombre es Alfredo Pedrosa y soy supervisor aquí en el condado de Napa. También tengo el honor de ser el presidente de MTC, que es una organización que hace el planeamiento para la región aquí en el condado de Napa y el área de la bahía y los 9 condados. También tengo el honor de ser el presidente de MBTA, que es la organización localmente que maneja el área del transporte, si son proyectos grandes, nuevos puentes o también si las secciones de los autobuses. Entonces, ahorita lo que estamos haciendo y el propósito de hoy es escuchar de ustedes. Estamos en un proceso de ver qué podemos hacer en la ruta 29, en las áreas de el 29 y Rutherford Road, el 29 y Oakville Crossroad y el 29 y Madison. Esas áreas son el enfoque de nosotros. Estamos trabajando juntos para ver qué podemos hacer para mejorar esas áreas. Nosotros reconocemos y cualquier persona que ha ido en el 29 reconoce que hay tráfico en esas áreas, pero también hay accidentes y queremos tener esas dos metas de mejorar el tráfico, pero también mejorar esas áreas para que tengan menos accidentes. Entonces, hoy es un día muy importante para que podamos escuchar a ustedes. Si tienen reservas, si tienen preguntas, estamos aquí a su servicio para escuchar esas preguntas que puedan tener. Y también estamos en una posición muy importante de poder tener acceso a $8 millones para hacer estas áreas mejores para ustedes. Entonces, muchísimas gracias por participar y estamos a su servicio. Gracias.
Okay, thank you, Supervisor Pedrosa. Here is our first poll, like I mentioned before. We want to get a better idea of who's joining us today, so please tell us about yourself. This is a multiple choice question, so you will be able to select more than one answer. We'll give you roughly 30 seconds for everyone to select a choice. We've got about 75% of participants who have voted. Missing a few more. Okay, we'll close the poll now. Share the results. It seems like we have a variety of people, stakeholders with us today. Thank you for joining us. We will move on to the second poll. We would also like to know which issue concerns you the most along SR 29 corridor. Is it safety, speed, or congestion? For this poll, you are only able to select one answer, so choose wisely. We've also noticed that there are some hands raised. We encourage you to type your questions in the chat box, in the Q&A box, and we will answer those at the end of the presentation. Let's end the poll. So here we go. Seems that congestion is the biggest concern, one of the main concerns. Okay. Thank you very much. Now I'll turn it over to Ingrid from MTC.
All right, thanks, Alberto. Good morning, everyone. My name is Ingrid Supit. I'm with the Metropolitan Transportation Commission. So today I wanted to give you some background about this project. Next slide. So in 2019, MTC began a feasibility study to evaluate the State Route 29 corridor between Rutherford Road and Madison Street. The feasibility study were focusing on these three objectives here: operational improvements, intersection improvements, and safety improvements. Next slide. So the issue we learned on the study area, currently there is no traffic control device north of Madison Street intersection. And because of the continuous flow on State Route 29, traffic on the side streets has difficulty finding a gap to merge into the State Route 29 and resulting in aggressive movements and collision. So next, let's take a look at the following video that shows the operational issues that I just described. So as you can see, this is the aggressive movements that I mentioned earlier. The way this car merged from Rutherford Road onto the southbound direction using the left turn pocket on the opposite side of the traffic and use it as basically a suicide lane because there is no gap to merge into the State Route 29. And then as you can see, the vehicles on the Rutherford Road starts to piling up, waiting in the queue, been waiting for quite some time, try to find an opening in the traffic to get into the main street due to the fact that traffic on this main road travels in much higher speed. So in comparison, I would like to also show the video on the right here is a sample of the roundabout operations. The roundabout flows much smoother. There is no wait at the intersections since the traffic is traveling in much slower speed. So essentially, it's easier to find the gap and merge into the flow. So basically, the comparison is really a 3-minute wait versus no wait. Next slide. So from the feasibility study, we collected collision data along this corridor. And on this slide, we can see crash data focusing on these 3 intersections. These 3 locations identified with a star indicating a total collision that we collected over 5 years period. And as mentioned before, Madison Street on the south at the town of Oakville is the only intersection that has traffic signal and had 6 collisions within that 5 years period. And as we move north along the corridor, number of collisions were increased. Next slide. So when we studied, these are the potential improvements that we have looked at and tried to address the issues that I mentioned earlier. So we looked at both the corridor and also the intersection improvements. We started with corridor studies and narrowed down to the intersection studies. So on the intersection improvement options, the column on the right here, intersection controls, specifically traffic signal and roundabouts, outperform other design improvement options and were selected to carry forward for further evaluation. But note that we will also be looking into other strategies as required by Caltrans delivery process. Our consultant team will be preparing an intersection control evaluation to determine which improvements that would work the best for each intersection. Next slide. So on this next few slides, I will go over some benefit of the traffic signal versus roundabouts. Next. So these are some data we got from the Federal Highway Administration. Traffic signal control, which is the most common options to address intersection operations and safety, is proven to reduce the severity of common crash types, as shown on the stats on the left here. Next slide. And on the roundabouts, the FHWA also recognizes that roundabouts improve the overall crashes and severity for intersection. So as we can see on the left chart here, fatal and severe injury crashes are significantly reduced. This is basically attributed to the reduced speed and the one-way circulation of a roundabout. So next, I will turn over the presentation to Frank Henry with GHC Consultant, who will walk you through a little bit more on the design concept of both the traffic signal and roundabouts.
Thank you, Ingrid. As noted, I'm with the development team, and I'll be talking about some of the similarities, side-by-side comparison of the options. Next slide, please. Visually here provided are some examples of, or an example of both a traffic signal and a roundabout concept. Attention is directed to the location of the crosswalks, the alignment of the approaches, and the general layout of each of the alternatives or options provided. Simply, a traffic signal uses the interior of the intersection for pedestrian crossings with straight and true alignment of the approach lanes and exit lanes, where pedestrian signals control crossing movements, where pedestrians wait for a signal after pushing a button and then move across the intersection with a signalized pedestrian signal head. Alternatively, a roundabout has crosswalks which are set back to allow cars to enter and circulate only after yielding to the pedestrian traffic. Traffic is slowed using curves, as you can see, the circular nature of the intersection. Pedestrians will wait for gaps in the traffic to enter the crosswalks. However, with the slower traffic and crossings are shorter, crossing a single direction to the splitter island only after the vehicles yield to them and before crossing the next lane. As such, pedestrians only need to look in one direction at a time when crossing the travel lanes of the roundabout. Next slide. Again, with the visualizations of both options, you may see here that the traffic signal poles, traffic signals and heads are all part of the traffic signal control of the intersection, while signage and markings convey the operation of a roundabout. Next slide, please. Here we transition between the basic operations, some examples to safety. The slides here show the number of potential collisions vehicles have with each other and with pedestrians at both intersection types. The red circles denote vehicle versus vehicle conflicts, while the yellow squares denote the pedestrian versus vehicle conflict points. As the number of potential conflict points noted there, you'll recall that those lanes and pedestrian crossings are located further from the intersection for the roundabout and within the middle of the intersection for the traffic signal. There are 32 collision or conflict points for potential conflict points for vehicle versus vehicle collisions or conflicts, and 8 for a roundabout, while there are 24 pedestrian conflict points at a traffic signal and 8 conflict points at the roundabout. These conflict points represent varied collision types and possible severities associated with the travel speeds and the type of collision. Next slide, please. Further, as we compile other side-by-side comparisons between the alternatives, we noted that we've already noted the number of potential conflict points. As well, vehicle speeds are expected to be faster with the traffic signal and slower for roundabouts for the reasons we illustrated earlier. This is also why collision severity may be higher with the traffic signal and lower with a roundabout. And frequency is also expected to be higher with the traffic signal and lower with the roundabout. And this is due to the reduced travel speeds and the reaction time that's allowed at slower speeds. Next slide, please. Continuing with the side-by-side comparison of the operations, both traffic signals and roundabouts are expected to improve safety, decrease delay, and reduce queues along the side streets. As well, traffic signals may be expected to reduce the corridor travel time, while roundabouts would be expected to reduce slightly or remain about the same. Cyclists are able to flow through with similar speed traffic in the one direction flow of a roundabout, while traffic speeds, while the cyclist would move or mix with higher travel speeds through a signalized intersection. Additionally, a traffic signal may also have protected left turn movements at crossing movements of the through traffic, while a roundabout functions with a continuous traffic flow, operating as a series of right turn movements. Now I'll pass it back to Alberto for an additional audience poll.
Thank you, Frank. Now that we know a little bit more about roundabouts and traffic signals, we want to know if you have driven through any roundabout intersections. For example, the First Street and California roundabouts in the city of Napa. We have about 85% of the participants who have responded. We'll wait a few more seconds. Okay, let's close the poll. It seems that most of you have driven past or through a roundabout. We have another poll coming right up. So if you've driven through a roundabout intersection, did you feel that this roundabout reduced the delay or the congestion at this particular intersection? Responses are trickling in. Give you guys a few more seconds. We have about 85%. Okay. And it seems that most agree that they did experience some reduced delay and congestion. We have one additional poll. Again, if you've driven through a roundabout intersection, did you feel comfortable using a roundabout? And we have 90% of attendees participated. Let's give people a few more seconds. Okay. Here are the results. It seems that most do feel comfortable using a roundabout. Thank you for participating. We have a few more polls towards the end of the presentation. Now I'll turn it over to Frank again.
Thank you, Alberto. So now I'll go over just a few of design concepts of installed improvements. Next slide, please. Here you'll see some examples of roundabouts throughout Northern California and Central California, actually. These are some roundabouts that you actually may be familiar with, being here within Napa County and within Sonoma County and adjoining counties for all that matters. I provided a few examples of roundabouts. However, there's a particular pageantry that goes along with those, not to leave out their counterpart, the traffic signal. We've all know what traffic signals look like with the examples shown previously. Not to leave out traffic signals completely, I have a fun fact that I'll share coming up with the next slide. Thank you. Next slide, please. In summary, and corresponding to the project objectives, both options are expected to reduce the overall collisions rates at the intersections. They're both expected to decrease the side street delay and overall intersection operation, while neither of these improvements are expected to negatively impact signaling a highway along the corridor. Now, before I transition, that little fun fact, the first traffic signal was installed, the first electric traffic signal actually, was installed in Cleveland, Ohio in 1914, pictured here, nearly 20 years after the first automobile was present on American roads. And now I'll hand the presentation back to Ingrid.
All right, thanks, Frank. So what's next? So this is the project timeline. So 3 community outreach meetings are scheduled for the project. The yellow circle is what we are doing today. We are currently in preliminary engineering phase. The project will begin environmental study later this year, and we will bring the result from the environmental study back in the spring of 2022 for a formal public meeting to discuss about the project and the preferred alternative. So to clarify what Kate had mentioned earlier, what we're doing today is not really a formal public meeting required by the environmental process, but today's meeting is really just to introduce the project to all of you. With that, I would like to turn it back to Alberto for another poll.
Thank you, Ingrid. We do have another poll. In your opinion, how effective are traffic signals in reducing congestion in rural communities? Very effective, effective, not effective, or you may be unsure of the effectiveness. About half people who have participated. Got 80% of the attendees given us a response. Let's wait a couple more seconds. Okay, let's close the poll. So most have an opinion that traffic signals are not very good at reducing congestion in rural communities. Let's move on to the next poll. Do you feel more protected driving through a signalized intersection? Yes, no, or unsure. We have about half of the responses. Okay, let's give it a few more seconds. Okay, let's close the poll. It seems that most people do feel a bit more protected driving through signalized intersections. And I believe that's it with the polls.
Hi, everyone. My name is Joseph. I'm supporting the outreach effort with this team here. I'm going to keep you going to the next slide, please, Alberto. For the rest of this meeting today, we're going to go through questions. It looks like some people have already used the chat to enter in their questions. And I see one patient hand raised from Martha. I'll get to you in a second after I go through the meeting protocols. This is what you can see on the screen is mostly for people who are joining on Zoom. As Alberto mentioned early on in the presentation, use the raise hand button or the mute button when I call your name to speak on a question that you have. For the person who's joining the phone, I see there's one joining on the phone. For you, who are you on the phone? Press *9 if you want to raise your hand. Again, it's *9 if you want to raise your hand. And then it would probably be the mute unmute button on your phone that you see on your dial pad. If you don't have a dial pad, it is *6. Again, it's *6 to unmute and mute yourself. Alberto, do you want to run through the Spanish version of the rules just in case?
Yes, I will do that. Hola, buenas tardes. Les queremos recordar que tenemos algunos protocolos para la reunión. Si tienen preguntas, por favor ingréselas en la ventana de preguntas y respuestas marcadas Q y A. Las preguntas serán respondidas ahorita después de que lleguen en la cola. Si tiene alguna pregunta y quiere hablar, por favor use el botón de levantar la mano, raise hand, o presione *9 para ponerlo en la cola para hacer su comentario en vivo. Otra vez, si quiere hablar y está en línea para hablar, puede usar el botón mute para silenciar o activar su micrófono. Si está llamando directamente, puede presionar *6 para reactivar y silenciar su micrófono. Le recordamos que si quiere hablar, por favor indique su nombre y la agencia con la que está representando. Okay.
Thanks, Alberto. Before I start on questions, I want to reiterate that this is not a formal public comment period. This is only a first of many series of public meetings that we will be hosting on this topic. Timing wise, spring 2022 is when we will come back with the environmental document so that you'll have more informed information to comment on. So stay tuned and sign up for updates on those meetings, and the contact information will be at the end of the slide. So with that, I'll jump to the first very patient hand up from Martha May. I'm going to allow you to unmute yourself and you can ask your question. And again, for those who want to add a question to the chat, feel free to do so now. Martha?
I don't have any question. I don't know how this happened. I'm sorry.
Oh, it's okay. That happens.
So,
All right.
no question.
If you have no question, then I'll move you back to mute. And I'll also lower your hand too, Martha. Next question by hand is Carlotta.
Hi, this is Carlota Sainato, the program manager with the Napa County Bicycle Coalition. Thank you for the presentation. My question is that I looked at some of the drawings prior to the meeting that are available on the project website, and it kind of looks like there's an opportunity for bicyclists who are not comfortable going through the roundabout on a highway road with vehicles to go off onto something like a class 1 path, but it looked it wasn't a highly detailed drawing yet. So I was just wondering if there are plans to kind of make that like the class 1 path, like the ones in the city of Napa at those roundabouts, if there's plans to implement that in the project.
Frank, one of our engineers, can you answer that question for us?
So I can speak to the operation of the cyclist through a roundabout. With regard to the roundabout, it would be traveling with would have slower operating speeds than present along the corridor, which would work to make it more compatible for cyclists to be able to take the lane. Depending on the roundabout design, most modern roundabouts actually have what would be a class 1 pathway or a shared facility so that cyclists and pedestrians could circulate a roundabout around the outside, generally speaking. As far as the addition of the pathway, I think maybe Sanjay, or I saw you pop up.
Yes, I mean, the Vine Trail project, there is an opportunity for us to include that trail project with some of these roundabouts, but those plans and details are not ready yet. Those are still preliminary engineering. Chuck McMinn from Napa Valley Vine Trail Coalition, he can provide a little more detail, and I see him having his hands up. I'll allow him to speak. You can unmute yourself if you want to chime in, Chuck.
I'm good, Sanjay. Thank you. Yes. So the Vine Trail is very closely following all of this. And what I can say is, sure, the design is not done yet, but we think that it's going to be a huge improvement on safety for both pedestrians and bicyclists. And we've got our teams looking at the detailed design, but from the overall layout, it's going to be good. And I think it's important that's going to be good for safety, because as the Vine Trail connects from Yountville up to St. Helena, there's going to be a lot more users that aren't in cars coming up on the west side of Highway 29 along the railroad tracks on one side or another, needing to get across any of these crossroads, Oakville or Madison or Rutherford, to the businesses that are on those crossroads. So we think certainly a signalized intersection or a roundabout intersection is much, much better than what we have now for pedestrians and bicyclists who have to kind of dart across between traffic, which is kind of suicidal. Now, I can't speak on any other aspects of the roundabouts, their designs, the traffic, or anything else, because that's not within the scope of what our coalition can talk about. But I can say that our 28-member organization is certainly in favor of this kind of an approach to improve the pedestrian and bicycle safety that is happening on that corridor.
Thank you, Chuck.
Thank you. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
All right, then I will move you here and lower your hand. Okay, thank you. Judith, you're next. And thank you for those who are typing in the chat, feel free to do so again. And thanks for their staff for answering questions live as well. Judith? Judith, are you still there?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, hi.
Oh, okay. First time on Zoom.
Welcome.
I'm a resident on Rutherford Road. I would like to know, I know this is general for the concept of control up at the corner, but what design accommodations are going to be made for the railroad track? And before at the Caltran meetings in the past, there's not room for a roundabout there unless the railroad track is eliminated. One, is there any prospect of the railroad track being eliminated? And number two, if it's not, I saw in one of your designs online a smaller roundabout and a slightly oval cattywampus one, which would accommodate the railroad track. It's a pretty tight space up at the end, but in the process of that smaller oval roundabout, it might fit in, but in the process, it also eliminates all the parking in front of the post office and so on. So those are all considerations about that. But most specifically for now, I'd like to know what the accommodations are for the railroad tracks, because that actually goes all the way down for the 3 projects.
Thanks, Judith. Frank and Sanjay, do you both want to tackle this?
Yeah, I can jump into that first. So with regard to the way that the roundabout, and as you said, you indicated you've seen the concepts. Those concepts were derived with the idea that the roundabout or the rail would not be eliminated. And so as far as accommodation goes, the alternatives will actually need to meet a number of criteria, and their design and size and what they, that's part of the intersection control evaluation that Caltrans will require for this type of improvement on a state highway. And in particular with Rutherford, it's actually the intersection of 2 state highways, 128 and 29. And so going through that, which we haven't done yet, going through that set of criteria, all of those will be a metric of which we measure the success or the ability of any particular design to accommodate, as many or all of the needs placed upon it at either of the intersections. Per our, approach on this, it's not to go in with the onset of a removal of the railroad track. That's not, I don't believe, even part of our approach at this point per any of the conversations that we've had. And as far as the number of parking spaces or anything like that, it'll all come out in the final design of how that works, meeting as many of the criteria as possible and weighing those alternatives.
Okay, thanks. Thanks very much.
Welcome.
And did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, just maybe answer one of our participant who actually sent a question in the Q&A, whether the cars will back up. possibly yes, but the wine train, as far as we understand, runs only 6 times in a day or something like that. So that amount of traffic that goes to that lane, we don't think it is such huge that would be an obstacle. But definitely we are going to be working with wine train and their schedule and to understand it better while we do the final design.
Yosef, there's a question about collision data on Oakville grade, and Danielle's answering it now. Sorry, Diana said she wanted to answer it live, but looks like Danielle's responding. Never mind.
Okay. Let me know if you, Danielle, what you want to. I don't see it on my end.
Oh, yes, I just answered it. It was about
Okay.
collision data on Oakville grade, and we pulled collision data specific to this corridor at the 3 intersections, but there are resources to find collision data specific to Oakville grade. And if Gary would like more information, he can feel free to contact NVTA. I'll put in an email address for Diana Meehan, who's our active transportation planner, and she can provide that information.
Danielle. Okay, I'm going to go back to the hands. Judith, I'm going to lower your hand. Richard, you're next.
I don't, can you hear me?
Yes, hi.
Okay. My general comment is any improvement on the Rutherford Cross is better than none. At this time of year, the backup is impossible. And I was going to make a comment, but I just heard it made from someone else. The train only goes by there a few times a day, and I think there's a way to accommodate the roundabout and keep the train tracks where they are. And I'm totally in support of roundabouts in general, and particularly at the intersections that you're talking about. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. Sorry, I forgot to ask your affiliation.
I have a house on Silverado Trail over there. I own Winston Hill Vineyards. I own the Benjamin Vineyards on the Rutherford Crossroad, and I own Frank Family Vineyards Winery up in Calistoga.
Thanks, Richard. Welcome. All right, I think we go back to the participant list. Richard is the last hands up. I have been combing through some of the chat as well. If you haven't had a chance to ask your question yet, please raise your hand now. I'm going to actually go to the phone. Oh, the phone person on the phone is not here anymore, but I was going to offer them to.
Yosef, there is one more hand up.
Okay, I see James. James, you're next. James?
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes, hi James.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm a resident of Napa. I've been a resident for 39 years. I have, of course, experienced the roundabouts in the city of Napa, as well as in other communities in California. In addition to that, my wife and I have gone to the UK perhaps 30 times, and so we're extremely familiar with the roundabouts in the United Kingdom. Roundabouts have one very distinct advantage over in the area of traffic congestion over signals, in that they constantly move traffic through the intersections. In the area of safety, they remove entirely the type of T-bone accidents that you could see when you would have traffic coming at each other from different directions. In addition to that, roundabouts as you know, in the Napa Valley, you're going to have visitors from not only all around the world, but you're going to have many visitors who have gone to the United Kingdom and Europe and will be familiar with roundabouts. Also, given, it seems to be, given the timeline that you're looking at, we're going to have even more roundabouts in our lives. I think that you're going to find them to be very, very successful in this environment from Yountville, Oakville, and Rutherford. Finally, I would like to just comment that your presentation is absolutely excellent. It was quite clear as to what roundabouts do and look like. Your questions were spot on. And thank you so much for doing this work. I look forward to being part of this process in the future.
Thanks, James. Appreciate the comments. I'm going to lower your hand now. Trudy, you're next.
Thank you very much. I had two comments to make. One was I'm British. I grew up in Britain, learned to drive there, and I'm very familiar with roundabouts. And one of the things I found in my home area, where there've been roundabouts for years, is there are now traffic signals on roundabouts because you have to organize when traffic enters the roundabout. So it's not a one way of dealing with traffic flow. It does sometimes, if there really is a lot of traffic, you need traffic signals as well to organize vehicles entering the roundabout. My other question was, well, comment was, I actually live in St. Helena. I've lived up here for nearly 40 years. And the junction between Deer Park Road coming onto Highway 29, that area there seems to me, with the amount of traffic now coming down from Angwin, Howell Mountain, Deer Park, that area onto 29, it seems that that would have been a priority for dealing with something like this if you're looking at roundabouts. That's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Trudy. Kate, it looks like you had responded to Trudy by chat as well. Did you want to?
Yes, I did. So, I mean, part of the answer, Trudy, is that the amount of traffic at the other three intersections, the volume is much more. I know everybody's perception is a little bit different based on where their intersection that they use frequently is. So, but it is in our countywide transportation plan. We are aware that that is an intersection that will be prioritized at some point when new funding is identified.
Thank you very much.
All right, Trudy, I'm going to lower your hand now. Okay. I think that was the last hand. Any others? I'm going to give a awkward 5-second countdown to give you some time to click a raise hand button. Gary. Gary?
Yes.
You're up next.
Okay. Do I need to unmute myself?
I can hear you.
Okay, good enough. I just wanted to second the observations from the lady who lived in England, having traveled there for probably 20 years or so. They have evolved their roundabouts and added signals into certain areas of high congestion where they didn't have space. So that might be something to advise to the planners as they go forward with the designs, not necessarily taking the jump into signal controls, but at least designing it in such a way so they could be added in the future, depending on how these things function as we go along. That's all.
Thanks, Gary. Anyone from the team who wants to respond to those two similar comments?
So let me take a stab at it. And yes, Gary, thank you for that. We note those comments. And in previous roundabouts, we have done something to just future-proof. We provide some empty conduits and all that if a signal is ever necessary to be put up in a location, if the congestion becomes that much and there is a need to control. And we'll probably do something similar if the roundabout option is chosen.
Yeah, if I could just add to that. So the use of the signals at the roundabout is merely a metering, a way of metering the traffic and creating the gaps within the roundabout. And as had been noted and shown in the presentation, comparatively, the roundabout itself is still the intersection control with the approach angles and everything that continually creates the environment of the slower travel speeds, the elimination of a right angle, and so the severity and type of collisions are much different with the roundabout, and that's what happens there. So the metering, and particularly metering at many of those roundabouts, is because they are have reached or exceeded their capacity, and the metering is necessary for them to still operate in their current form. And so as Sanjay mentioned, sometimes we can plan for that and put the conduits in. Sometimes we can also design roundabouts with additional capacity that can be created at a future time through some false work of the travel lane and approaches. Generally speaking, that's how the designs can be accommodated, so that maybe we don't have to meter in the future. So just some information, not specific to this, but more or less to the concept of metering and the collaboration between a traffic signal and a roundabout.
Thank you. Gary, sorry, I missed your affiliation besides avid traveler to UK. Gary, what's your affiliation?
A general citizen, and I'm also a member of the county advisory board, transportation advisory board.
Thank you. I have one more question. I'm going to lower your hand, Gary. One more question in the queue here from Laura.
Hi, yeah, this is Laura Peters. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm a resident of Dwyer Road, and I picked up my mail at the Oakville post office, our family, for over 50 years. And my question is, leaving the Oakville grocery and post office is very dangerous right now. And I'm wondering, assuming a roundabout goes in there, how will you deal with both the Oakville grocery and the post office, especially exiting the location, which is just north of the grocery now?
Thanks, Laura. Frank, shall we start with you?
Yes. So with regard to the way that the concepts have kind of materialized thus far, but also, as I mentioned before, there's a matrix that would be created as part of the intersection control evaluation, and understanding how these impacts to either ingress or egress to, say, the Oakville grocer or any of the particular driveways would be handled. One of the things to note, particularly with the roundabout, I think, and that's where your more or less your question or focus was, is that the speeds going through the roundabout would be less, and therefore the traversing and exiting the roundabout or exiting the Oakville grocer on the north side of the building would basically, with the slower travel speeds, would be expected to be easier to traverse and exit the driveway. We don't anticipate at this point that left turn pocket would be eliminated. It would be part of the approach to the roundabout. So as it exists today, your movements out of the driveway to go south, for instance, could be made in two stages, utilizing the two-way left turn lane in the middle as a first stage of entering the southbound traffic. But even the southbound traffic would be expected to be slowed as it's on approach to the intersection control. I hope that covered.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Thanks, Laura. No, lower your hand as well. All right, I think I've cleared all of the hands. Let me double check on the chat window again. Looks like chat window is quiet. Hand raises have all been responded to, but I'll give you another second if you want to raise your hand. Looks like no one's on the phone, but if you are on the phone, the raise hand button is *9. I'm going to give a awkward 5-second countdown again. Okay, looks like we have answered most of our questions. I'm going to pass it back to Kate to close us out. Oh, Kate, you're muted.
Thank you, Yosef. I wanted to acknowledge the project team because the funding on this project is has a very tight window, and they're working very hard to move this along, make sure that they're hearing comments from members of the public. And this is just the first step in that process. So I wanted to make sure that you all are aware that you have plenty of opportunities to make comment and to ask questions. You'll see on the last slide here, both Pam Kwan and my contact information, as well as our websites where the project information is located. I wanted to also just let you know how much we appreciated your participation tonight, and spread the word about these projects and let people know what we're looking at, what are the options, and make sure to let them know that they can contact us at any time.
Right. Thank you, everyone. And with that, I will end the webinar. Have a good evening.